said so. Oh, are we live?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, no,
Oh,
we
really
are
gotta see
live.
something about that.
We're live, guys. We gotta put the medical conditions away
Oh,
because we.
Yeah, just use that
Whoops.
ointment I sent
Right.
you. It does wonders.
thank you.
Oh,
Thank
You're
yeah,
welcome.
yeah.
Zoinks. Well, okay.
Tim sells that too. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
What?
I know, right? They sell everything.
All right, we are here tonight to celebrate. Kind of. I don't think it's going to go that way, but my my return from just about a year long hiatus from comic book, specifically superhero movies and TV shows. Now, it was about a year ago that Don is really excited about this.
I'm so glad you're back because this is good. Just I want the shit show that we used to have to continue. It's the best, you know.
Well, I mean, in fairness, there have been a couple of comics discussions, mostly loopholes involving my 6-year-old, DC League of Super Pets and some other things. But yeah, I basically, after Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I'd had enough, and I swore off most of Marvel Phase 4 at that point. So I've quote unquote missed a lot. But and as Pat McDonald, dear friend and friend of the show, pointed out, I caved. I hadn't made it a full year. That's only because of the release date situation. I believe I'm 6 days shy of 365. But I'm not
Pretty
even
good
another.
calendar, Mayan calendar. It's you're in there.
Splitting,
There you go.
That's
splitting hairs.
in Russian dog days. That's pretty much a year. So
Yeah.
you're
There you
good.
go, Cosmo time.
Right.
No, that's the So I wasn't going to wait, another week to talk about Guardians because it's a new movie and we're already talking about it after it's already come out. So yes, it's brand new.
Oh, wow.
In some ways. Now, we are here talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the end of James Gunn's contribution to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now that he's taken up residence at DC and is going to be relaunching all of our favorite DC heroes. We got the DC shill here tonight. Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of the Spoiler Room. Pointing down at him is Don Shanahan of Every Movie Has a Lesson and Film Obsessive and the Cinephile Hissy Fit podcast. And we have Will Johnson returning. Also of the Cinephile Hissy Fit podcast. Welcome. Got I feel like I'm going to get ganged up on here tonight by the cinephiles and the Hissy Fits and the podcasts. And we also have Jeff York returning of the Establishing Shot. Thank you. It's going to be a fun roundtable tonight. Possibly a little off balance, but I think the fervor from both sides is going to kind of even things out. I know what some of you thought of Guardians 3.
Wow. That was the one click, huh? All right. Thanks for your traffic. I appreciate it. Yeah. The algorithms are sound. Yep.
Hey, I try and go into these as cold as possible because I want to get like a genuine kind of feeling for it, but I also want to know sort of where how the table is set. I saw this movie over the weekend, took almost my whole family. We let my oldest stay home because he hates movies. Although he's going to see this weekend with a bunch of his friends for one of his friends' birthday parties. So he's not escaping Guardians after all. So I really, and as I said in my mini review I did with my youngest Luke, I need to see this movie again because I really did. I loved it. I have some problems with it, but I was trying to figure out which one do I like better, Guardians 2 or Guardians 3. He actually prefers Guardians 2 to this movie.
I like your son already.
Well, that I would hope so.
Right.
Right.
I'll add it to the list of reasons over here in the bulletin board. Got it. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big fan of Guardians 2. Not the least of which is because I've got a connection. That's the movie I saw the night before we went to deliver my youngest Luke. That's how long ago this movie came out. 6 years ago was Guardians 2. Now we had the sequel 6 years later. But we were kind of universally won over by the movie, but that's not necessarily the universal sentiment. There are some divided opinions. And I think we've got a healthy panel tonight of folks who are really head over heels and not so much. That's all I'll say.
Let me guess what Don's gonna say. Ready? It's a 10-pound thing in a 5-pound bag, or whatever he says.
I got a different analogy tonight. Don't worry. I got some shit tonight. I got you.
Does the cream rise to the top, or
no?
whatever?
Not a food one tonight. I know how diabetic you are. Nope.
Well, Don, don't keep me in suspense. What is your analogy?
I called this movie in my review, where I called this an air conditioner of a movie. You know, it does that whole thing about being
window unit or central
window. Unit, for sure. Absolutely. So no, like for me, it's that you know, it's a comic book movie breeze. It is crisp. It is nonstop. It does make a hot room feel good. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of fun in this movie, but my goodness, like as an air conditioner is, the compressors are chugging on full blast. The thermostat is set low for maximum chill. Of course. But like any air conditioner, you can kind of run that machine a little too long. It'll churn, it'll rattle, it'll need a filter or two, it'll frost up, it'll run out of refrigerant, and it's going to overdo the coolness in the room where you're starting to like check your nips, and it's just a little too cool. Because if you have to ask all movie, did it look cool? Do you really have to ask? Come on, man. It's just, it's fine. It's good. It's a good send off. It's 18 minutes too long, but no, it's cool. It's what this Marvel movie kind of phase we're in needed. It needed a jolt of coolness, and it'll work. And but I'll still take 2. I'll still take 1 easily.
I missed the bag thing.
I know, right? I'll bring another appliance. It's a dishwasher of a movie next week. Okay, all right.
Listen, speaking of, what did you say? A bag of cool? I don't know. But a cool breeze. We have David Fowley of Keeping It Real. I thought you were going to be out, watching movies tonight, not talking about them. But we are certainly happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So we were just kind of getting the setting the table as far as opinions. And Don unleashed his new air conditioning analogy on us.
45 minutes ago.
It's the one time you're gonna get it. Don't you worry.
No, but now it's preserved forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the other reason I think I need to watch this movie, not only to find out where I put it in kind of my Guardians ranking, is, and I was talking to my wife about this, it has sort of that first time long movie syndrome, where after it's over, you walk away and like, oh, I see how all these story bits connected to create this larger whole. But in the middle of a 2.5-hour movie, say when there's, hold on a second, I just got to put up the spoiler banner just in case. I'm going to stray into some territory. When there is the giant climactic battle in which, say, an entire planet is blowing up and a giant pyramid red spaceship is taking off, I'm like, oh my God, this is such an emotional ending to the, wait, what, 45 minutes later, what's going on? Oh, the movie's still happening. Not that I have a problem with it, but this does, it's also kind of the Return of the King thing where it's got like 4 or 5, possibly 18 different endings, these constant stopping points. And in the end, as a whole, I think it holds up. But in the middle of it, I was sitting there going, I'm enjoying this, but how much more is there? Are we wrapping up? Or are we going to go on another adventure?
So that was my main complaint about 2, was that what you're talking about. My big thing with Volume 2, and it's my least favorite of the Guardians movies, is because I feel like it has like the great opening, 50, 60 minutes, and then it is that kind of, that last battle is kind of just never ending. And I have other problems with 2 also, but I never got that. I think I got what you're saying about the Return of the King thing, because there is some moments where it's like, at least he didn't fade to black like Peter Jackson did, where you're about to get up and you're like, okay, okay, we got more. But yeah, I know what you're saying, but I don't know if I felt that. I felt that more with 2 than 3, honestly.
Okay.
What you're talking about with the 45 minutes later, the pyramid's still coming up and all that stuff. That was the problem. It's
not so much that, it's that the planet's blowing up, the pyramid is rising up out of the atmosphere. You figure there's going to be like one big battle between the High Evolutionary and the Guardians, but then there's all of this extra stuff. There's the giant space station Nowhere comes out of nowhere and kind of merges with that red pyramid, and there's a mutiny, and then that's put down, but then the bad guy's not dead, and you've got Peter Quill floating into space. Like, so much stuff happens that it is literally, after that quote unquote big climax, you still have nearly an hour left of the movie to go. And yeah, it's, again, it's not necessarily a criticism. It's just something that I was aware of, and when I watch it again, I'll be like, okay, so we're about halfway done with this story. I think it's sort of a problem, and granted, I haven't been keeping up with the Marvel films in the last year or so, but just kind of in general, because these things come out every several years, there is that, I feel like, a compulsion to let's fit as many like half-hour TV shows into this 2.5-hour movie as we possibly can, sometimes to good effect and sometimes for ill. David, what did you
Yes.
make of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3?
Oh, that's right. That's why we're here.
He's gonna start talking about some Sundance film from the festival, right? Well, I saw it.
I almost forgot that I saw this movie.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
High praise.
I'm kind of on the fence with this one. I kind of got what I expected from James Gunn, but I feel like some of the things that are going on in this movie is like there's just almost too much going on at times. Like as far as like I see no reason really at all to have Adam Warlock in here. It just he's just kind of first of all, I think it's an odd way to bring him to the screen, like as far as portraying him. Considering his importance in the comics, sure, yeah, everything gets deviated for MCU usually, but it just feels like, well, we need a really powerful cosmic character to shoehorn in here. And yes, he even hinted at him in the last one. I get it, but I just feel like that's almost, if you're gonna have a movie revolving around Rocket's origin, that's there's almost you're not really fair to the character of or the potential of Adam Warlock to even bring him up in here. It's like it's almost like you could save that for another movie. But I get it. You want to continue to expand and build the cosmic portion of the MCU. Fine. It feels like what's the need for this character? Just to have another powerful character around and maybe some comic relief.
Well, let me ask you, let me just dig into that for a second.
Yeah.
Would you have minded if he was just this, just called, the Sovereign's hired gun or something, and not named Adam Warlock? If that attachment from the comics had been taken away, would you feel that way about the character still as he's portrayed in the movie?
I wouldn't mind that, except that, well, I mean, there was that one, I think, end credit scene where Elizabeth Debicki's sovereign priestess, she's like, I shall call you Adam. We're like, oh, and he's sitting there in his golden cocoon, and those in the know that, well, okay, this is going to be Adam Warlock, and one day he's going to be hatched and born, and here he is. I guess I wouldn't have minded if like they didn't even call him Adam in this one, and then eventually somewhere down the road, sure. But I know that this is Gunn's swan song. He wanted to include that in there. That's fine. I guess I feel like I felt like almost half of the Guardians team themselves feel kind of tired in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
As far as actors and characters, they just feel kind of like tired. I mean, I understand the kind of subplot drama that is going on with Quill and Gamora, but it just didn't work for me. I'm sure it's fine and nice for Saldana to be playing a different type of Gamora, like more of that from Endgame. Sure. But I just felt like it was just kind of old, and Quill's like sad sack, depressed, drunken dude, like, oh, I miss my Gamora, and you can be my Gamora too if you would only just give me a chance, and blah 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 kind of thing. It's like, this is weird, it just doesn't. I was like, all right, dude, move on, or something. Just like, I don't know. It just felt like it didn't really feel like it serviced the potential for that character either. It's just like, okay, here's the main character supposedly of the team. You know, the guy who thinks he's the captain. We know he's really not. And I just feel like here's a character who's just kind of stuck. And I get it. You know, he's wounded. You know, he's emotionally kind of, you know, still crippled from what he experienced. But I don't know. I mean, there's so many other things going on and so many other areas in which I guess he's needed in his life, where his friends depend on him and he's needed, but he's just kind of licking his wounds and his beer, you know.
Well, I mean, it's weird because you're describing exactly what the character, like what his arc from the first Guardians is, all the way through the other movies and ending up here. You're unpacking it and making perfect sense of it, but it doesn't sound like you're jiving with it. Like it's not that it doesn't make sense. It sounds like you wanted something different. I mean, I think all the reasons you described, or all the things you described, what's going on as a character, I think is one of the things I loved about where he and Gamora are at in this picture, especially, you know, with the end. And yes, again, we're talking spoilers here, folks. You know, everybody kind of goes their separate ways.
Mm-hmm.
There is it's bizarre that the very end of the movie is like Star-Lord will return. It's like, okay, Star-Lord's coming back.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if that's supposed to be a gag or if there's some kind of
a gag. Like it's the legendary Star-Lord will return. You know, it's kind of like, and you're seeing him eat cereal. You know, it's not. Yeah, it's a gag.
It could be. I mean, you never know, because I mean, they are going to need all the characters they can if they want to continue to do like Avengers movies. You know, like Kang Dynasty, Secret Wars, or whatever. we don't know if they're going to need Kang. Maybe he's going to return as Kang. Who knows? Yeah. So I mean, he could return when the universe needs him. He's back. Somebody else is going to be directing him. You know, James Gunn has even said, you know, I have no problem somebody else directing a Guardians movie. Just don't make it like me. You know. Yeah, and honestly, maybe what I liked about, like, definitely the first movie and even the second movie is let's get into the subject of needle drops really quick here. What I liked about the songs that Gunn selected is a lot of those songs were like deep cuts from, like, you know, either AM radio from the 70s or just, you know, wow, you know, songs you haven't heard in a long time, maybe from popular bands, but a deep cut, right? And here we start out with an acoustic sad sack version of, you know, Creep. Okay, that's a little obvious. Okay, I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I want a perfect body. Okay, we get it, you know. And then at the end, you know, the dog days are over, you know, Florence and the Machine. It's not that I don't like those songs. I do feel like they're kind of overused, sure. I just feel like, okay, couldn't we have found like a more obscure song, a deeper cut, or something that doesn't necessarily take us out of the story? You know, because I think, like, when we hear those songs, it's not like the first time we're hearing those songs, and we pretty much already know those songs from something else. They're always going to remind us of something else, right? And we're just like inserting this playlist song in this story, in this setting. It just seems like a lot of times too heavy-handed of a needle drop, and I don't know. I was kind of expecting something like from Gunn that's a little bit more, I don't know.
I would just like to say I appreciate the fact that I have had 2 movies in 2 months that have both needle dropped No Sleep Till Brooklyn. A nice deep cut from the Beastie Boys. Thank you very much.
No, that's good. Yeah. And I'm glad it wasn't Sabotage.
You know, it's not like Star Trek that just defaults to Sabotage.
Yeah.
You know, they needle dropped No Sleep Till Brooklyn again, and I was just ecstatic. I'm like, wow. 2 movies in 2 months have dropped that song, and I love it, because unless you've listened like I do religiously to License to Ill, you're not going to really know that song.
Right.
So, you know, and I appreciate that.
Well, and that's the thing. Well, I mean, come on, BC Boys, No Sleep Till Brooklyn is one of their big, you know, songs. Before Sabotage, that was like their big thing, or one of the 2 or 3. as far as the deep cuts thing, I'd push back a bit on that, David. I mean, like it's a bit strange because Guardians 1 and 2 had more like 70s and 80s kind of pop songs, right? The thing, and I've seen this complaint now, is like, why is all this modern music? It's because he got the Zune at the end of the second one that had a playlist after those decades. So it's fine to have more contemporary songs, but I mean, like if you're talking about the other Guardians movies, it was kind of a mix. I mean, Come and Get Your Love, I mean, when you say deep cuts, that's like you get 10 people who like music in a room and like 1/4 of one of them
or
understands one of the songs.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean that's the thing is
I also
could be a matter of taste. I think that most of the songs in this movie worked for me. There were a couple that I didn't know, I think, but the beginning song I didn't quite like, but mostly that's because this is a different kind of a Guardians film, that a different kind of opening. The other two are kind of whimsical and fun and uplifting, and this was like, oh my god, are they all gonna kill themselves before the end of Act 1?
Well, I think if I could mention that is, well, one thing I learned about James Gunn is that he writes these playlists into his screenplay, so it's part of the character development. So for me, like, I don't get the feeling that Rocket listens to a lot of music, so like he's probably listening to some of the stuff for the first time, and yeah, maybe it's not the deepest cut Radiohead song, but if you got somebody who's not feeling great about themselves and they're listening to Creep for the first time, they're probably going to listen to that a lot. It's their first exposure to that kind of music. Like, I thought it was actually a pretty cool character driven song. Even if it is on the nose, it would be on the nose for somebody. That's why we listen to music sometimes, is to get that on the nose feeling of what we have. And that's, it's on the nose for us, but for that character, it seemed completely natural and organic for me that he would listen to that.
And remember, target demographic of this movie is half of all the ages of us here.
I was gonna say half. Yeah, most
so
of
like,
the target audience.
Creep and Radiohead is like, who's that song? Like, they're our first time.
What's a radio?
Yeah, and then even Florence and the Machine, that's a 15-year-old song. So like, I mean, we're not getting as time goes by territory here. Like, it's what you're gonna get for the morphing of eras that this is, and again, target demographic. I mean,
Volume 2 probably has the deepest cuts out of all of them.
Oh, wham,
except
bam,
for
its,
except for its opening, Mr. Blue Sky. I have my vinyls here, so I'm looking at but I mean, Volume 3 does have a number of deep cuts too that aren't going to be familiar with a lot of people. Yeah. It's just they may not have been as prevalent as they've been in the previous movies. I mean, for the most part, they're a lot shorter in your needle drops. You get, sometimes they're even a little bit in the background in this movie, and, more so than up front.
Maybe that was the goal, is to bring in more songs that are a little bit more familiar to viewers. Fine,
Yeah, and it's weird because we are kind of off on this music tangent, but talking to you guys about this, it really draws to mind how important music is to the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I mean, they are almost like visual narrative playlists. I think that's kind of a cool aspect of it. But let's move on. Jeff, I do know that you did not. We have one person on this panel, it's their favorite film of the year so far, and one person that is definitely taking sort of the opposite tack on that. Jeff, tell us, what were your thoughts about Guardians 3? What were your expectations going in, and what did you walk away with?
Well, for me, I'm not quite as in the details as you guys are about the lore in the comic books. I mean, some of the stuff you say, David, I need a translator for, because I don't really know much about some of these characters.
That's fine.
No backgrounds and stuff. For me, it's more elemental. And again, this is one man's opinion, probably disagree against 5 tonight, or maybe 3 and 4.5. But I found it a shocking shift of tone that never quite recovered for me watching it. And I'm not saying that what you guys and your experience in viewing it isn't absolutely valid. And if you loved it, that's great. But for me, I found it to be, before this, easily one of the more comedic, along with Ant-Man, of the MCU universes franchises. And I found this one actually positively unseemly. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I think in past episodes of this, and even to some degree the way they were treated in Infinity War and Endgame, outside of Peter Quill sort of being responsible for destruction of all mankind, they were kind of caricatures, pretty broadly drawn, pretty kind of silly in some respects. I mean, even at the end of Endgame, they set up that Thor is going to go on there and it's going to be sort of a sitcom in space. So for this one to start off with, Rocket's backstory, which, yes, we know that he's got the mechanical body and all that kind of stuff, I found that so graphic and sad and dark that I don't know, for me, the film ever recovered from it. And now I know that it's CGI, and Jeff, characters like the walrus are talking, but the walrus has also his legs chopped off for these sort of Dr. Joseph Mengele experiments, and now he's got them replaced with wheels, and they're so lost that they're trying to make the best of this, and it's depressing, and it's very psychological, and I think it's so such a shift from, I think, where a lot of this has gone. And then, as I looked at a lot of it, I started to have other issues with, I think, sort of this darker, too unseemly tone. The violence here is very violent, not just in destroying the cities, but when Nebula is fighting, we see her neck broken a number of times and twisting all about. Now, I grant you she's got that, and it's possible to sort of recover from that, but it was pretty graphic from where it has been.
No, we've seen her do that before in terms of.
I was just going to say that,
yeah.
But it was with the accumulation of everybody's carping at each other. Gamora has no character to play; she plays one note through the entire movie. I don't know who any of you are, and I don't like you. And the violence and some of that kind of stuff, it just, to me, started to become downer. And I also even thought, usually with the villain, you want stakes, grant you, and this guy certainly provides a real threat, but he is so one note, yelling. It's one of the worst performances, I think, in a movie from the MCU. There's no nuance, there's no understanding of him. He screams every line, and for me, that it just all kind of built up. I walked out of the movie with a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, and I'm not saying that our audience is reflective of maybe the way other people see it. I know that it's a very polarizing film already, but I didn't laugh nearly as much at this, and I didn't hear much laughter when we saw it in our Grant group of critics, but I've heard them laugh raucously before it. I thought it was a little tepid on the whole. So again, if you loved it and liked it, great. I found it, the scene where we start off with that hand reaching towards the little baby raccoons and everybody else is hiding, it was very powerful. It's very effective. I also don't know, this is one man's opinion, I don't know if it's right for this franchise. I think that kind of stuff is like, could you bring a 10-year-old and under to this? I would suggest no. Not with the experimentation, and then they end up, doing other things to those poor animals, and it's like, holy crap, we're dealing with some really heavy kind of themes that touch on fascism and Mengele's experiments and things like that. Is that in the most caricaturable of the franchise in the MCU? It didn't feel like the right fit for me. So that was my sort of 20,000 view at it. Maybe the music wasn't right either, David. I'm not sure, but that was my kind of overall feeling from it, and I left with a bad taste in my mouth.
Okay, well, jump in.
Sorry.
No, well stated, Jeff. I understand it.
No, it's well stated.
Thank you.
I totally get that. But I also think that because the first Guardians and the second one came out so long ago, and we do remember the comedy of it, and also Infinity War will bring into this. We also have to forget that the first time we're introduced to Peter Quill in the first one, his mother is dying of cancer horribly. Right. In Volume 2, he has to not only kill his biological father, but he also finds out his biological father gave his mother cancer, and he loses his father figure. In Infinity War, there's an amazing scene. This is why I always defend Chris Pratt as a great actor. There's that scene on Nowhere where Gamora is like, you need to kill me, and you can see that pain in his eyes because he knows he's going to kill her because she asked him to, and he's crying, and then it turns into the bubbles and everything, and then he has that anger, which a lot of people like to blame Star-Lord for, but he just found out, this is on top of after, both of his fathers and his mother dying,
sure.
that his girlfriend is dead. I mean, there's some, and then of course at the end of Infinity War, half the Guardians get whisked away into the universe.
Right.
I think we forget how much Star-Lord is a tragic character. I mean, I don't blame him for sitting in a bar and drinking his life away. He's lost virtually everything in his life. And I think the comedy is one thing, but one thing that I've always loved about these movies too, and this is why and Don always shakes his head when I say this, but like for me, Star-Lord is up there in terms of my all-time favorite heroes, like Han Solo and Indiana Jones. I put him up there because the humor isn't there just for the snark. Like anyone who knows stand-up comedians, anyone who knows comedy, that stuff comes from pain. And what I love about Star-Lord is that he is a person full of pain. And this movie touches on that a lot too. I think it would be disingenuous of these characters after all they've been through, after all the stuff they've been through, if it wasn't a darker movie. I think they're owed that. And real quick, and I'll stop because I know I'm taking over, but the thing I didn't like about Volume 2 so much, unlike the first one and this one, is that I always kind of felt like right when they were hitting a dramatic point, there would always land a joke. And in this one, they kind of actually let the drama actually play and let you actually feel that stuff. I mean, at one point, Nebula says like, "Hey, Drax is the only person in this crew that does not hate himself. All those people have inner pain and yeah, if it was jokey and comedic and uproarious, I think it would be a failure, because I think these characters need to be taken seriously and given that weight. Now, I agree with you on the fact that it physically is viscerally more violent and disturbing, especially if you're sensitive to animal cruelty. I mean, there's a lot of disturbing stuff in here, and I'm not a censorship kind of guy, but like I wouldn't take my 9-year-old to see this. I just wouldn't, because it's too disturbing. I mean, you can't see my name on here, but they literally rip a dude's face off, which is kind of cool for me. But it's that's disturbing, and I agree with you. So it is visually disturbing, but I think emotionally it has to be to sell these. I
just realized I had the face.
To your point, Will,
I was wondering where that banners off. Yeah,
literal face off. To your point, Will, I think you raise very good points, and I know that you who like it probably would agree with him on that. And I don't disagree that there have been elements of sadness and pain and comedic angst that's behind a lot of the farce and the comedy. I guess maybe in the past, by and large, even in those two epic Avengers films, there seemed to be a little bit of a better balance for me on it. And maybe part of it has to do with villain character, because I think he was a real misjudging here. He's so evil and so loud and shrill that every time he came up on screen, it was like, there's nothing likable, and I'm not saying he has to be funny. He's not, but I mean, Hans Landa in Inglourious Basterds was incredibly cruel, incredibly vicious. And yet every time Christopher Waltz uttered a line, even if he was going to choke Diane Kruger or force, Shoshana to eat, cream, which is against her Jewish religion, knowing full well that he was testing her to see if she could withstand the test and his little tease, there was a excitement and there was some sort of verve that he brought. And I think sometimes with the best villains, and I watched all 3 seasons of Hannibal, and as despicable as Mads Mikkelsen's Hannibal could be, there was also more to his character. This guy was just terrible. And then I think with the animal cruelty, that just edged it over for me, that I found this one not enjoyable. And even though there has been that dark stuff before, this one, I think the balance is off.
I want to. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, David.
No, I was gonna say. I mean, when it was announced that the villain would be High Evolutionary, I mean, again, excuse me, Jeff, but going into the whole comics lore of High Evolutionary,
yes,
I knew going in. I knew going in it made sense, because High Evolutionary was always, he's a scientist who always wanted to create his own, life and perfecting that life, by whatever means it took. And so he would make these animal hybrids and everything. And to me, watching this movie, it confirmed that like there's some things that work so much better in the comics and not so much here. And I guess to have that character as the villain, considering what we've learned so far, even before this movie, of Rocket's past, it kind of makes sense that his origin is tied in with the High Evolutionaries, antics and everything. Fine. But I guess what was odd is that even when Rocket is in the flashback, young Rocket is hanging out with these three characters, like all the other characters were like almost like steampunked, right? They were all like hodgepodge together with like either spider legs or wheels or something. And Rocket is like the only one who is like closer to the way that High Evolutionary is, what his goals are as far as a kind of like an anthropomorphized
acceptable
animal.
hybrid.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
So, but everybody else just seems like the Island of Misfits and the toys that time forgot or something. And just like, it just seems like less like he's kind of like a Dr. Moreau type character in space. And then these are his discards, the walrus in the wheelchair or whatever. And it didn't, visually, it just didn't seem right. And not that it was,
it wasn't Toy Story 4, thank God.
Yeah, right.
Well, David, in regards to that, I mean, there is a distinct visual difference between Rocket and the three other kind of cellmates that he's got there. And I think the answer is in the High Evolutionary. He is tinkering with these life forms, trying to create something new, and he's just basically like screwing around. Rocket is, he's a young child when we first meet him in those flashbacks, and the other ones have, some years on him. It's not like, a 65-year-old man with a teenager, but they are older. So it's reasonable to expect that maybe High Evolutionary was messing around with these creatures, getting like, oh, I'll give this one spider legs, and this one, I chopped off his, legs, so we'll give him these wheels and see maybe he can manipulate them with his mind or whatever he's doing. By the time he gets to Rocket, he may have found that he didn't need to, add all these mechanical appendages to things. On top of that, he wasn't interested in Rocket for his physical abilities. He was interested in what I thought was one of the most brilliant and kind of understated ingredients in this story, is that the High Evolutionary had killed probably billions of people on thousands of worlds trying to create this perfect race. And he was able to evolve life and create life and humanoids and all that stuff physically, yes, perfecting that aspect of it, but he couldn't make something that could think on its own and create. And that's what Rocket, whatever that spark was that was in Rocket, that evolutionary advance, that's why he was interested in him. So maybe because you saw him, and I definitely have to push back on you guys, this was not a one-note character. I mean, there were moments of him having, tender moments, tender for the High Evolutionary, of him sitting there with Rocket kind of on his lap, looking at that little, iPad or whatever, trying to figure out equations and stuff. There were moments when Quill and I can't remember, it wasn't Drax, it was someone else, like walking into the room, and Groot. It's in the trailer, but Groot, and you see that moment where High Evolutionary is like looking at something on a computer screen, just like holds up his hand as the other guys walk through. It's sort of like he is above everybody else. And yes, he does yell a lot. Yes, he is an angry, frustrated character, but that's because he's getting so close to achieving his idea of perfection. It is always just out of reach. Plus, he's having to send these subpar creations, like Adam Warlock, out to retrieve Rocket Raccoon, which I think ties in nicely with the plot of the second movie. Rocket escaped from the High Evolutionary's prison probably decades ago, and because the galaxy is so vast, he ended up off the map somehow. Although maybe one of you guys can help me, maybe it's just a plot hole. If they did have that kind of time bomb device that was inside Rocket that made it so he couldn't be tinkered with, I guess there wasn't a tracker on it, but that I don't know. Anyway, when he shows up on the radar of the Sovereign, and in Guardians 2, the Sovereign were created by the High Evolutionary, and when they probably report to him that, this gang of misfits stole our cosmic batteries, and one of them was a raccoon, then that sets off this whole thing where he's like, okay, that Adam Warlock, that, super weapon, pull him out early. I want this thing now. I want it yesterday. Go get him out. Care if he's half baked and kind of a nitwit. So all of this kind of comes together to make sense. And I understand that. Yeah, I think that it was Chukwudi Iwuji's performance. I thought for what he was given was one of the best Marvel villains that I've ever seen on film.
Wow.
I'll put it out there.
Agreed.
Okay.
Mark, jump in here.
Water's great.
Yes.
No, I wanted everybody to, because being the DC shill, this is my favorite Marvel movie altogether as a full round movie since Infinity War. I enjoyed Multiverse of Madness just as much, but for other reasons other than this. This film felt at least more like what we were used to for the first three phases. Okay, phase 4 has been a stumbling block. This is the first one that comes closest to what we got in those first three phases. May not be exact. It does still have some warts to it, but overall, and this villain here, the High Evolutionary, I'm all with Ian. This is what I was hoping Kang would be, because in all honesty, Kang never felt like a threat in Ant-Man or even in the flashbacks. Unfortunately, it's not anything against the performance. It was how he was written, almost too subtle, because we have all these different forms of Kang. In fact, I would have loved if the High Evolutionary was some variant of Kang, that they spun it way.
He
Could
did like
be.
purple. Yeah.
Could be
But
someday.
I
legal
like
cases.
Kang. I get exactly what Jeff's saying about being a little bit more one note in that. I think there is more layers to him, but this is a villain. He felt like a threat to the Guardians. We actually have a villain in the MCU, and it's been kind of weak, even with Ego. I'm sorry, even with Ego in 2. For the Guardians, the villains that we get, especially in the first one, you're like, I'm just not feeling that villainy. I'm not feeling that. I want what we got out of the High Evolutionary is what I was hoping we'd get out of Kang. Just this dripping, like, he's bad. He is an actual threat. And that's what you felt with the Evolutionary guy, because the way he cared, was kind of one note. He's making the perfect creations. He doesn't give a rat's ass who he kills or life. He's just trying to make, and that's scarier in some ways than if he cared about a lot of his creations. He only cared about Rocket. And I think with Rocket, it wasn't even so much the fact that he created someone who was smart and maybe the perfect brain. Rocket's smarter than him, and it bugged the piss out of him that he created something. It's almost the Frankenstein monster. He created something that's better than him, and it bugged the hell out of him. Now,
Well,
as
and there's
far
also just real quick on that. Sort of that note. There was one line, and yes, he did yell this line. I'll give that to you.
Yes, he
But
did.
it was an interesting line that kind of implies a backstory, and almost like you almost want to see a mini series of the High Evolutionary's origin, because it's very late in the film where he says, "There is no God. That's why I stepped in."
Yeah.
Now it's it's an interesting idea, because think of how vast the galaxy is, how many worlds this guy has created, how many civilizations he may have made that thought that, as we saw in this alternate Earth, that thought he was God or he had some kind of mystical powers. Turns out he's just a space scientist mucking about because he doesn't have anything to believe in. Perhaps he thinks that he'll find the key to belief somehow in making something, that is, bigger than he is, and perfecting that form. But yeah, I'm sorry, Mark, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No. I'm going to say I surprised I enjoyed this film as much as I did. And maybe it's because I'm used to DC films. So everyone talking about the darker tone didn't bug me at all. I'm used to that watching the DC. But even for a Marvel film, it was dark, but it still had the Marvel elements in it. But I just enjoyed what they did with the characters. I liked the fact that they didn't actually have Quill and Gamora at the end. Gamora suddenly, her heart opens up 3 sizes that day. I'm glad they didn't do that. And one of the things that we got to remember, because I read an article on it, is that James Gunn got put in kind of a difficult position with Volume 3. Volume 3's story was supposed to come out before Infinity War, but he got fired. He
That's
got
right.
fired.
Yeah.
So the story with Adam Warlock, which is, there's rumors and rumblings that he had planned to have Adam Warlock be more of the main kind of antagonist in the film, but his characters got handed over to the Russos, who ended up killing Gamora, and he had to find a way. So
He
I'm
got
not
bored. I know.
you know, and I'm saying it's not excusing all the war, you know, some of the holes in that, but we also have to look at the way why maybe the tone in some of this is uneven is the fact that when he comes back, what did you guys do to my character? You know, he's got what you have with the storyline now. And the thing that I love the most about this film is that it's what I loved about the first films in the first few phases of Marvel. It's its own beast. It has its own storylines, whether they're good or weak. It has its own. You don't have to rely so much on a blip, the Snap, Avengers, Krill, Kree, whoever, this gray guy, that CGI guy, whatever. These storylines that we get with the Guardians, whether or not they're weak or not, are at least theirs. And that's what was missing from Ant-Man, was the fact that Ant-Man's story wasn't his anymore. I mean, he was Ant-Man, but the other two Ant-Man films were his stories with little bits of the universe peppered in. Guardians has a little more subtlety to it, but it's still got little bits of the peppered in from the other MCU, but it's still its own story. It's your own issue of the comic. And I think that's what appealed to me the most outside of the other phase films that we've gotten, is that this is what I want from my comic book films. Sure, throw in little teasers for the bigger universe, but let these characters have their own story and breathe a bit in their own issue of the comic.
Well, I think, and Mark, I think you're kind of touching on something that I really responded to here, which is, you know, the High Evolutionary is a big threat, but at least in terms of what I can tell of his ambition, he's mostly a threat to the Guardians because he wants one of them. He's not like a Thanos. He's not even like Ego, where he necessarily wants to remake the entire galaxy. I think he just wants to be right once. Like, I feel like he could make a planet, you know, if he got, oh, sorry, my screen fell asleep. I feel like if he could make a planet with the species on it that was whatever he was looking for, he'd be happy with that. Maybe come up with a solar system and maybe expand outwards. But he's not looking to snap all of existence in half. He's not looking to turn the entire galaxy into a giant, you know, planting seeds all over the place to have everything become him. You know, it's, in a way, this is almost a remake of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. We get the same bit towards the end where the big secret that Mantis reveals to Gamora is the caves under, you know, inside planet Ego are filled with millions of skulls and dead bodies from the failed experiments of Ego trying to find the perfect son. And that was, you know, essentially Peter. But in this movie, it's about a guy just wanting to, you know, do his own thing. It becomes a threat to our main characters, but it's not like, great, how is this going to fit into the Kang Dynasty? It doesn't, because as you mentioned, Mark, it's its own kind of pocket thing that is ironically free from the meddling of the rest of Marvel, which because of that, you know, interference by the Russo brothers, and I'll use that term lightly because, you know, they got to make movies somehow. And James Gunn wasn't around. But I had heard that Gunn was going to go to take Marvel in the direction of the cosmic, cosmic stories. When he was let go, the Russo brothers stepped in and everything sort of shifted to the realm of like magic and, you know, mysticism, which is where we get, you know, a lot of latter phase 3 and 4, I guess. But yeah, let me see. Oh, I do want to touch a bit on the whole kid thing. I will say it does depend on the kid.
Sure.
know, I would not take any child to see Guardians 3 because of all the reasons you mentioned, but I did take my 6-year-old. We talked about it. He didn't have any nightmares. I was even like kind of like side eyeing him during the bit where Rocket rips his face off. I'm like, but
That was
no,
brutal. That was
it's-
pretty brutal.
It
Yeah.
was brutal, but I think a lot of it is, context and talking about it with them, explaining, the magic of movies. And we've had this conversation because we've seen most of the Marvel films already, and there's some pretty disturbing stuff in others. And it's like, you just explain this is fiction. It looks real because they are real people, but they're play acting and they're special effects. And I can show them, behind the scenes stuff of how they do these kinds of things. So, I wouldn't take a 3-year-old to see it, but everyone's mileage may vary.
Can I talk about the visual effects real quick?
Please do,
if I can. So everybody knows that because of so many projects and so many stresses and on demands, that the VFX have definitely suffered. I mean, I like a lot of the stuff that was in Quantum Mania, but you can still tell that it's rough. I mean, even though I like the concepts of it, it's very green screen. A lot of the stuff that people complain about the MCU becoming, and even I, as the Marvel shill, can even agree. Like, some of these movies have not looked great, but I think that's solved with this one. They must have focused a lot of attention on this one, because this one is some of the best visual effects I think I've seen in a long time, and it's not just effective; it's beautiful, staggeringly beautiful. This film, it's stunning to look at, and
costumes, production.
I'm glad
right there
that
with it.
Marvel got it.
And
Marvel got its
real,
groove back with this one. Technically,
Definitely. Tip the hat.
Right.
there.
I mean, that's the thing. That's one of the things that struck me about Guardians 2 is when we first see, it's the opening couple of scenes of the movie where we visit the realm of the Sovereign, and it looks like they're on a real soundstage where all these details have been actually hand carved with a little bit of CGI details, but it's visually it's interesting to look at. And I felt like when they went to, in part 3, like the organic space station, where
I love the
goofy
organic.
and
I love that.
And
That was
Nathan
cool.
Fillion and his security guards, they look like they're wearing those giant, you remember Muscle, the wrestling toys from the 80s? They look like they're all kind of dressed up like that. It looked like they were having fun, and not everything was shot in the volume where it's just characters going.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we'll put all this stuff flying around them, in post.
Yeah.
I think Gunn used a lot more practical effects in this than we've seen since, I'm going to bring it up again, since Infinity War. I think we've got a lot more practical effects in this one. As far as your people, I think part of the Quantumania thing is one that gives you the green screen is the sheer volume of CGI people. And granted, some of them they had to be, but they weren't that clear. Here we have CGI folks mixed in with practical effects of folks, or practical effects that are enhanced by CGI. We got Howard the Duck. Yay!
Playing space poker with Lloyd Kaufman. Yeah.
Not enough.
Not enough. We need that Howard the Duck movie.
We really do. Like, that's when I was watching it. Yes, I thought, even though he's only in the movie for like 10 seconds, like he is in all these things, I'm like, damn it, just give us a Howard the Duck movie. Do it right this time.
You know they would waste an 8-episode series on Howard the Duck.
I would love it.
You're not going to get an hour, but I'll take an 8-episode series.
I'll take an
Yuck it up.
8-episode, 20-minute sitcom type situation with Howard the Duck.
Do the Werewolf by Night thing, which I didn't watch because it was part of my moratorium, but like a Halloween 1 hour long special with Howard the Duck doing something.
And
that's
Leah
another
Thompson
one you
has
would
to show
like.
up.
Yeah.
That's
Oh my
one
gosh.
you would
Heck,
like.
even animated. They could do some
Yeah.
of these things as animation.
Yeah.
I mean, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse proved that you can do the animation thing, which is closer to the comics, and you do it very well, so it doesn't feel like you're just doing storyboards.
Well, that's true, Jeff, because I think Howard the Duck showed up in the What
If?
animated
Yeah,
series,
animated.
right?
Yeah, that's right.
Totally
He did
works.
What If?
Yeah.
He's in all 3 Guardians. He's in Endgame for 4 seconds.
second,
yeah.
Right.
He's in the final battle.
I think I missed that. I don't
he's
remember
in
what
What
it
If,
is.
and-
Yeah, he literally he does show up. He's holding a big ray gun type of weapon, but he shows up just very briefly.
It's when the wasp shows up. When the wasp shows up, he's right where the wasp is, and she comes into frame in front of him. But he's
right.
Howard Duck is in Endgame, and he's an Avenger now.
And the thing is, I get what I get the criticism for sure of this film. I think, though, of the films that have come out since the end of Phase 3, because we've got to, we look at this body of collection. This is probably the closest to what people may be used to for a Marvel film since that.
Yeah.
In many ways, just the way it's structured, the way the characters are, the way the story plays out, how things move along. It's a Guardians, yes, but it's also more of what people look for, I think, anyway, from just the murmurings in our audience when we saw it. This is what they're looking for, not Multiverse of Madness, where they're coming out of the theater going, holy crap, I was expecting camp, but not that much. And I'm just sitting there going, more camp, more camp.
Yes.
In some
but
respects, in some respects, I think the MCU has actually kind of been hurt by their own success. I think
Correct.
in addition to the Infinity War and Endgame being so powerful with all hands on deck and their long stories and very involved, but they really got a lot of the characters well integrated, interesting dynamics of people interacting with people that you didn't expect, like Tony Stark and Nebula was very funny at the beginning of Endgame. They also, I think, were hurt by all of this, when we sit there and wait every time we see a screening for the post-credit sequence where they're going to set it up so it somehow fits with the next movie. And that's to your point, Mark. I think, when they're doing them as one-offs, and I think that's actually a very good sort of direction, even though they're going to do phase 5 and they're having some questions about where they do that. Exactly. Maybe if they do that or not. Disney is just finding more problems with everything. Now they're looking at Disney Plus today with a lot of what we cut. But I think those one-offs would be better because they could not only keep the budget down, but I think get an audience who is going to maybe come to these more often than not because they don't have to necessarily see everything. I think that's a good way to think about DC too. We talked a little bit about that in your, critics chat room on Facebook today, but I think that would be great for Gunn as he approaches DC too, to say these things don't all have to be all hands on deck, and we can do a show, a movie version of When in Rome with Catwoman and the Riddler, and Batman comes into the last act to clean up some details, and the rest is these two, arch villains with a mafioso over in Rome. It would be half Catch Me If You Can, half The Dark Knight, which would be kind of cool, and you don't have to know everything about everything to watch that movie, because the one-offs that they do in comic book world are one-offs as well, and those would make I think better movies than having always connected everything.
Two things on that. I mean, one, that's why I agree that Shang-Chi, everyone knows I sing Shang-Chi's praises. That was that was almost like a phase 1 movie because
totally.
It was very isolated within itself. Like they reference Iron Man 3 because of the Mandarin thing, and they play it off as a joke, which is great. But it's very much an isolated thing. It's its own pocket universe thing. They introduce all this stuff, and they don't really set up anything crazy with that one. So, but I do want to say, in response to the victim of your own success, I agree with you, because obviously, and this is what created Cinephile Hissy Fit. There was the whole argument about what is cinema, right? Which really pissed me off, because it could be anything to anybody in a lot of ways. But I think Marvel, they did a couple of things. They took a lot of the complaints that people had about the MCU, and they said, okay, you're saying that we're too stock. Like, even though I don't think they were, if you really look at some of the stuff they put out, there was such a disparity of genres and directors and things. But whatever, if everyone said, hey, it's just stock, and it's, everyone just has to point a camera and click, and that's it. That's the movie. So they have gone out of their way to make these very interesting, director-driven things. I mean, this is very much a James Gunn film. Multiverse of Madness is very much a Sam Raimi film. There's a lot of the TV shows have been very interesting and like visually eclectic and different and weird, and they've allowed a lot of artistic creativity. And that's great, because they're showing like, yeah, this is art, like, deal with it. But it's almost like a response to the cinema thing, when you were making great stuff when you were quote unquote stock. So go back to doing that. I mean, don't care what a couple other people are saying about if it's true art or not. Make what you do best. And that's what they were doing for 10, 11, 12 years. And now they're you kind of feel like they're trying to be like, okay, we want to be taken seriously. We want to make sure that there's creative freedom, but we also want to still set up all this stuff. There is definitely this flux going on. And I kind of agree with Mark. I agree with Jeff. Like, just get back to the basics. Like, Who cares? It works for the Fast and Furious. They make the same movie every.
Oh gosh. Yep.
Now, I'm just saying, like,
Yes.
like
True.
I said, you don't have to be all hands on deck. You don't have to be setting up every single
Right.
thing. Just get back to like what made this an institution in the first place, which is
Right.
taking your time, slowly building this stuff up. Now, I know you got to close out some things. This is obviously a closer to this quote unquote
Sure.
genre of it. But you know, if when you have these new characters you're introducing, just take your time. Slow it down.
Yeah.
The MCU culminated after 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years, that's a long time. Now they're trying, I feel like they're trying to get it all in the last
Well,
3.
I mean, we've talked about on these wavelengths here just how overstuffed the last 2 years have been. Like, I know some of that's the COVID bubble, and you got to get the stuff that you had on the shelf out before it expires. But God damn, the saturation is real. The last 2 years,
And that's
to hear them only have 3 movies this year and what a couple of shows is a step in the right slow down direction of take your time. I'm with.
Yes.
my
Well, I
podcast
think
partner
that-
on that one.
I think probably, you know, the victims of their own success thing is, and again, I haven't watched Phase 4, most of it,
You're not.
but
You
I
took the
have-
right year off, Ian.
but I,
You
you know,
took
I've
the right year off.
well, but I've heard people talk about it, and I've, you know, it's hard to avoid conversations about it because we're immersed in pop culture. But I mean, if you look at viewership, if you look at box office, I mean, even Guardians 3 did
make that
not
much
do
money.
that well. And I think it's not necessarily, you know, I've heard it's
No,
comic
it's
book movie fatigue. I don't necessarily think it's that. I think it's that there's too many of these things and they're coming out and just people aren't responding to them. So there's not an impetus to go out and see them, especially because this thing is going to be on Disney Plus in 6 weeks. I almost
By
guarantee
July.
it.
Yeah,
Right?
look at Dungeons and
Shazam
was it
too.
Shazam,
Yeah.
But
Dungeons
that
and
fast, but yeah.
Shazam, Dungeons and Dragons, and The Pope's Exorcist, which granted, they aren't really big box office films. They were in the theater a total of, Dungeons and Dragons was for a month. Pope's Exorcist was like 2 weeks. Renfield was 2 to 3 weeks,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
shockingly
on
fast.
streaming.
Yeah.
So you're not getting the box office
Yeah,
because you're
Evil
right.
Dead Rise is coming
Evil
out on
Dead
streaming.
Well,
People
and
are
next
just
week or
going to
something,
wait
yeah.
till it comes
Those
on
are
streaming.
studio decisions, though. Like
Oh,
if you
absolutely.
want it to matter, don't
Right.
hold it. Do
Right.
Top Gun. Like
Right.
don't put it on anything for 6 to 8 months and
Yeah.
make people want it.
Well,
make
and they
people
also
wait. Avatar did the same thing. You know,
they also need to. They said they weren't going to do this, but it's just a fact that it's happened.
yeah.
Is that you have to, like, there are things like a lot of people when they watch Quantumania were thinking, "Oh, this is our introduction to Kang," but those are a lot of people that didn't watch Loki that he was already introduced. Like
Yeah.
in this movie, it's not as heavy, but like if you need to know that Mantis is Star-Lord's sister, you had to watch the holiday special. You know, like a lot of these young Avengers they're introducing are from the TV series, and the Marvels is going to be a big test because you've got to know who
Second and
Miss
3.
Marvel is.
I
You've got to know
think
who
that
the WandaVision
that movie
character
already
is,
failed the
you know?
test. I cringe every time I watch that damn trailer. Now,
Uh-oh.
I have not watched Miss Marvel.
Why do you
You
keep
know, I've-
watching it?
Huh?
Why do you keep watching it then?
Because it keeps showing up when I go to the movies.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's the thing is like you're following up. You talk about a tonal shift. I mean, the next Marvel movie is the Marvels, which looks like a mediocre tween comedy. I'm sorry, I don't
there
know. I don't
for
have
it.
the. I don't have. I don't
That's
have
the
the.
variety Will was talking about though. Like they're changing it up and
Right, but
Yeah.
here's the problem.
You got to watch
Uh,
WandaVision. You got to watch, all these things.
But
do.
I'm not even
That's the
talking
thing, you
about
gotta-
that. I'm talking about Marvel as a brand is kind of all over the place. Now, when you're diversifying as far as TV and movies, you can do that when you're riding high on the hog. If this was like post Endgame,
yeah.
you'd be like, yeah, we could do anything we want. But the problem is, and now with the writer's strike, they're talking about what's going to happen with Blade. What does the rest of Phase 5 look like with Jonathan Majors, who is supposed to be Kang as the big bad? I wasn't kidding when I said if there is a Phase 5, because even no matter how long this
Well-
writer's strike lasts and all these other problems with like production houses in Hollywood, by the time they come back and say, yes, we're finally going to do Fantastic Four, they'll be like, we're just into
yeah.
Westerns now, man. Comic book
No.
movies
Yeah.
are
But
dead.
I'm with you.
Well,
That's
and
that's-
little all of Disney's economic issues right now.
right.
Right,
But
right,
I'm with Ian where the two big hitters,
Yeah.
and we've said it here, like if they can patiently, and maybe the writer's strike will force it, but also Jonathan Majors' bullshit will just all that might force their hand too. But like that break glass and emergency secret button is called Fantastic Four and X-Men, and they're there All you got to do is pull the
Yeah.
trigger, and grab the axe, grab the fire hose. But and maybe this will force them to slow down, do it right. Like, hey, we took our swings, we closed the things we did in phase 4. Phase 5, we tried a few things, close this, close that, open this, open that.
Yeah.
Kang didn't work. He got beat by Ant-Man when he shouldn't have killed Scott Lang.
Should have done.
But we took some swings and we missed. They have backup. Like, this isn't DC where you're fucked because you blew it on your only characters you had. They got backup. There might be time to use them.
For history perspectives, historian note, technically Quantumania is the beginning of phase 5, just so you guys know. That's but I'm just letting you know
out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I also think, Don, and I'm not disagreeing with what you said, but I think if anything, some of these movies have, certainly Spider-Man has shown that, what didn't work 3 years ago and seemed to maybe be a death knell for Superman can be quickly changed if they have the right script, and that's what Gunn's starting with, and other things. I mean, even Batman was kind of considered to be like, where do we go with this? And then suddenly, it comes out with Robert Pattinson, and everybody feels that it has a new freshness to it. The one thing I am reminded of, and even this goes back to your year sabbatical, and it always runs through my head when I watch these, and it's kind of funny. The big event movie that I'm looking for this year, and I'm sure I speak for David Hawley when I say
Barbie.
this, is the new Indiana Jones movie. And there's something so incredible about the fact that, we haven't had 10 of them. We've only had a few. And this one is
We've only had 3.
Recognizing that
And we
photo,
will
not
that
looking
was
forward to it
a
either.
3.
It's
No.
Godfather 3. We just kind of gloss over it. But, and
Thank you,
it
Ian.
just
I'm
reminds
with
me
you.
of what Syndrome said in The Incredibles, which I think is probably something that we've all sort of felt a little bit this, and that is when he says, after he makes his thing that's going to make everyone super, and when everyone's super, no one will be.
Right.
And I think there's so many superheroes here, and these are all supposed to be special event movies. There's too many of them. They stop being super. They stop being special. And then it all just sort of becomes the same. It's like, how was that? That was okay. It was pretty good. Was it great? It was good. I miss sort of, that feeling. And I think if I was going to DC, I would say, okay, we've got to get the Halle Berry taste out of our mouth. What can we do with Catwoman? Or, what I'm just saying is, that was not a good version of that franchise. And they still talk about it today. They still rag on Catwoman because of that.
Oof.
And some other things. And there's plenty of things they could do. I mean, they could do a Batman one-off with Ra's al Ghul and his daughter, which could be just an interesting psychological study, and they wouldn't have to spend more than $100 million on it. Seriously. I mean, I think that they're going to be forced into that situation, the restricting the budgets and time and everything else. Maybe you should just embrace it and make things more special again. Or super,
I agree.
whatever you want to say the word is.
Well, I think that breathing room, as little as I'm looking forward to James Gunn's DC universe, because it's not coming out for 2 years, like 2025.
Agree to disagree on it. So.
Well, I understand. Yeah. Here's the thing. But, we've got the Flash movie coming out,
Which
next
is
month,
the
right?
greatest superhero movie ever.
Nope, I don't care. Give me
it'll
the
make
Batwing. Give me the Batmobile. That's all I'm there for. I
It'll
don't care
make
about
you
anything
forget
else.
about everything Ezra Miller did. It's so good.
God, that headline was the worst.
I don't care. I want to
But-
see the
But doesn't it kind of demean the show, which
Nobody's
was
going there for
Ian.
Flash.
Ian was making a point. Go ahead, Ian.
Oh, thank you. But no, here I understand. But my point is, some people have seen the Flash. Some people say it's the greatest thing ever. The proof will be in the pudding in June. It's going to be, I think it's like 2 weeks before Indiana Jones or something like that. So it's going to be the battle of the summer blockbusters, right? It is kind of wrapping up this previous iteration of, the Snyderverse with Ezra Miller's Flash meeting up with, Keaton's Batman and Batfleck and all this other stuff. But it is, from everything that we understand, not going to tie into the new DC universe that Gunn is going to be launching. Now, if this movie makes $1 billion, Zaslav's going to be knocking on Gunn's door and being like, make these connect.
Yeah.
I don't know, because
Back to the drawing board.
Aquaman made $1 billion, and they're trying to shelve that.
Oh,
second
that's
one
right.
As much as
Yeah.
possible.
I totally
Yeah.
forgot about Aquaman
Is that
too.
even
But
going to get released?
Christmas.
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
I haven't.
they
seen-
can't write off something that big.
Yeah.
An unfinished Batgirl, you could flush that
Yeah.
one down the toilet. A super finished Aquaman, you can't. Yeah.
Well, but I mean,
don't know.
it'll come and go, right?
It'll be
because
Shazam.
I think the big litmus test is going to be the Flash movie and see how well that does. But what I like is what we're talking about, this cooling off period. The plan, at least right now, from what I understand it, is they're going to be working on this next series of movies and TV shows for DC and Warner Brothers and HBO and stuff.
Yeah.
In 2 years. So
Yeah.
maybe that's enough time for Marvel to either die off or get its act together, but we don't have to worry about a whole bunch of like sub-tier superhero movies from DC and sequels and all that stuff.
Blue Beetle.
It's their chance.
Blue Beetle.
Oh,
my God. Well, no, but here's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
these are all. I don't think that. I mean, I've seen the Blue Beetle trailer and I'm unimpressed with that. I don't care about Aquaman 2. I feel like all the attention. Those movies may as well not even exist for all the excitement that people are generating for this Flash movie. But my point is, my long-winded point is, if they have James Gunn's Superman, and then they're going to have like that weird kind of Batman,
Brave and the Bold,
Brave and the Bold, and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They all sound very compartmentalized, very pocketed, and maybe that is the
That's the way
approach
for
that we're
DC
kind of
to
talking
go.
about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't put like you said earlier, don't put everything. Not everything has to connect. Not everything has to be in the same movie. Just make good damn stories that work.
We have to roll it back. I mean,
Yeah.
and it got to the saturated. Well,
Yes, us. We do.
no, we do.
No,
All of us.
I'm in.
Where's that WB
us
money?
with our
Put your hand in.
with our box office. No, but as in general, they have to roll it back because it got too crazy with everything being connected. I mean, once Marvel took off and look how they connected these movies. Suddenly, Universal Monsters is going to have a
Godzilla.
and everybody's like acting like, Marvel has a connected universe. I'm like, Troma was doing it far longer before you guys, so don't even try to give Marvel
With
the
James
whole
Gunn,
connected with James Gunn. But I think they need to bring it back to be more
Carpathian.
Compartmentalized.
Wow! Thank you. Wow!
Kardashian?
I can't believe how
Kardashian, yes.
Yeah,
There's the
that
Barbie.
word. What Ian
Barbie.
said.
We want to combine Barbie and superheroes.
It's what DC should have started with. In all honesty, if DC would have taken that approach rather than keeping up with the Marvels, if they would have just did their own compartmentalized movies and eventually build, like, regardless of what MCU is doing, I think they would have been better off that way and been more acceptable than trying to do all the connected stuff at once. I'm looking forward to seeing what Gunn may do with this. I'm not a Snyder bro. Those guys annoy even me, and I'm the DC shill. Okay. I'm like, just give me a good movie. And that's what Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 for me was.
Look at you bring it back.
Look at him.
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 for me was just a fun time at the theater. And that's what I want. I don't care what DC or Marvel or whatever IP it is. Make it fun. And that's what it was for me.
I just want to see like a trailer that focuses mostly on Rocket's torture, and then have Mark from the spoiler room, a fun time at the movies.
I'll do it.
No,
you had that
Guardians from Brazil
too.
Yeah,
the raccoons from Brazil.
Wow. I think
Go to Johnny and you will make sure the boy's father is dead by 13.
Wow.
No. Okay.
For those of you who've seen the boys from Brazil, IR11, anyone, Gregory Peck playing Megala. Come on.
Now I just want to see like the South American version of The Boys. Anyway, sorry. No. All right, guys. We're gonna wind this down. I think. I think
we'll be back for Little Mermaid. Oh, sorry.
No, we won't. Anyway, that brings up a good point. I do want to talk about what we have coming up here on Kicking the Seat. Well, first of all, for those who are prone to getting up early, I'm going to be doing a live stream this Friday at 7 a.m. Central Time. That's 5:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. I'm going to be doing Spotlight India with my new friend Shashwat Mukherjee, talking about a 2016 film called Fan, which is very interesting.
That is the best superhero name ever.
What, Fan or no?
That's the best superhero name ever.
Not a fan.
But But next week, sorry, and tomorrow night is going to be the closing night of the Chicago Critics Film Festival.
Hey.
So at the Music Box Theater. So I'll actually be in attendance. I've missed the entire festival for different reasons, but I'm going to be there.
Good job, boys.
Tickets and information below. And then next week, Wednesday, week from tonight, I'm going to be back here with, hopefully some of you, talking about Superman from 1978. I'm returning to comic book movies by talking about probably one of the first comic book movies as we come to know them. And then 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be talking about Superman 2, the Donner cut and the original. Oh my gosh, Mark, what do you have there?
So pretty. It's so pretty.
Mark, you look like you've been working out.
Oh, yeah. Go to that diner. Beat that guy's ass.
Well, and that Ian, that might segue into something we're working on where we might be talking about Superman 3
in early June. Yeah, it's almost going to be 3 weeks of Superman. This is crazy.
Wow.
But yeah, we have to get something officially on the calendar there. But yeah, check out Cinephile Hissy Fit podcast. Not podcast.
Yeah. All pussies here. Correct. Yeah.
Whoa. But yeah, all the information for all of my lovely and talented guests will be below. So there's going to be no shortage of things to talk about. And as we get into June, we're going to be talking about Flash. Yes, we'll talk about Indiana Jones as much as that's my birthday movie, and I feel like God hates.
Sorry, Ian.
That's right. We're June 30th kids, right? You and me.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
Right.
And my other friend AC, who we do the Hammerland shows with, he's also a June 30th baby. We got to do a crossover of Indiana Jones and Hammer films. But no, anyway, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. This conversation went much better than I thought it would, just because there's no screaming, there's no tissues, there's no hurt feelings.
I have some
Wait till the after
questions,
show.
Ian.
Oh no, what?
Are you going to go back and watch all the superhero movies
That's a
that
good
you
question.
didn't see last year?
Yes,
that's a really
Love
good
and Thunder,
Doesn't
Wakanda
really have to.
Forever,
He doesn't really have
Miss
to.
Marvel.
He
Do
doesn't
it.
really have to. Maybe Miss
Oh,
Marvel.
that
Miss
poor
Marvel's
You said
actually
you
pretty
would.
good, so Miss
I
Marvel's
did, but
pretty
that was
good.
a year
You
ago
would.
before I had any idea what I was in
you
for.
Would.
I'll tell you what, by the time James Gunn's Superman comes out in 2025, I will have caught up on the rest of Phase 4. I'll make it that deal.
You mean you're going to watch Superman 4 Quest for Peace before Wakanda Forever? Come on now.
He's already watched it.
Well, I've seen Superman 4.
Yeah, but
Wakanda Forever,
you got your 4K box set and everything, and
Well, I think we're only talking about going up to 3.
I see.
I think, right?
I see.
One
Is
is
Four
Cinephiles-
Nuclear Man.
Well, I've never seen 4, so I'll be happy to watch that.
Oh yeah,
There we
John
go.
Oh,
Cryer.
you say that now because you haven't watched it. You can say
We
that
did
you
a
have to
cannon
watch it.
fodder. We did a cannon fodder episode on Superman 4.
I'll watch anything.
do
John knows this. Mark
You
knows
sure
this
will.
too. I've spent an
Yeah.
entire 2
I gotta-
days watching all the
I
Puppet
gotta split,
Masters
guys.
stuff.
I'll talk to you later.
Well, okay. Bye, Mark. All right, and that's our cue to wrap things up. You talk about a Puppet Master marathon, Will, and then we start losing people.
Oh boy.
No, anyway, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. Again, I got David Fowley of Keeping It Real, Don Shanahan, and Will Johnson of Cinephile Hissy Fit Podcast, Jeff York of The Establishing Shot, and I have been Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. Please like this if you liked it, subscribe and all that good stuff. And again, check out my lovely and talented co-hosts. All the information is below. Until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks a lot. Take care. And I can say this now because it's comic book movies again. Excelsior.
Oh,
Hey now.
enough said.